Why do you have these institutions that the religion, philosophy, politics, all of these systems are institutions which are being financed, organized, and directed by the people who mean to put you into bonds and chains. God has created all of the animals to be free. He created everything. God who has created all things. Freedom is the one thing that you see everywhere, except for man. And consequently, the real freedom in man is up here. Consequently, the old Hiram Mann, one of the first governors of the state of California, Hiram Mann said, I think it was Hiram Mann that said, just kind of keep paying people off and hoping everything will come out all right tomorrow. And little by little by little, what goes around comes around, and we are facing a terrible time of judgment, I believe, by the divine forces in the universe which men have called God. I don't know what God is, but I know what He isn't. One of my teachers once said, you can't make God do anything He doesn't want to, and if He's going to do something, you can't stop Him. So consequently, since you can't influence it one way or the other, you should get in tune with the divine force of the universe and go with the flow. And that's what I believe, and that's what I've been trying to do all of my life. Just go with the flow and find out where the facts lead you. Because the more you begin to investigate what we think we understand, where we came from, what we think we're doing, the more you begin to see we've been lied to. We've been lied to by every institution. What makes you think for 1 minute that the religious institution is the only one that's never been touched? You can bet your bottom. Educational institutions, colleges. Where do we get the word college? College comes from the collegia, the Latin Roman college of cardinals. I mean, I could go on for hours just giving you examples. I mean, when you graduate, you come out with a square mortarboard, a black square mortarboard. What's all that about? Black square mortarboards. It has to do with the planet Saturn. Saturn, we're told that in the Old Testament that the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, were worshipers of one God. That's never been true, not true now, and never will be true. That's just one more story that's been given to us. That's never been true. The Hebrew people were worshipers of many gods, many different divine beings. They were the most eclectic theology on the face of the earth. Next to modern day Christianity is Judaism. Eclectic meaning it has collected from all over the world concepts and ideas and put it together and called it today Judaism. Judaism today is the most eclectic religion on the face of the earth. Virtually nothing of what it teaches is true. Virtually nothing of its supposedly background is true.
A lie is a very, very serious offense. Lying. It is one of the greatest sins. Go and read Galatians 5:19. Liars are called there. They are told that they won't inherit the kingdom of the Most High God. Probably this is why. When a story is stolen, the people whose story are stolen forget their own footsteps. That's an African ancient proverb. We have to develop, or rather something develops called the wounds of erasure. A people's story is the root of their dignity. When you control a person's story, you control their imagination, their worth, and their future. For centuries, black people have been given altered religious narratives, stories that hide Africa's presence in the Bible, stories that turn sacred truths into tools of compression. Pastor is going to expose the lies told to black people in the Bible. You see, these are now falling into a category called religious lies. I shall get back by the end of the video, of course, where we shall also have a deep critical analysis.
The real truth is that the people who are in power, who put this system together, have been in power for thousands of years. This has been going on from day one. I have the highest of respect for the Bible. Anyone who knows me knows I read it and study it all the time. But I'm also well aware that there are encoded messages. The rabbis will tell you that in the Old Testament is filled with encoded messages. And I believe that Christianity is probably the most powerful encoded message the world's ever had. It's one of the oldest messages in the world, and I believe that the Christian teachings in the original scriptural understanding is the most important, volatile story the world's ever known. And it's sitting right in front of you, and most people don't even see it. It is an encoded story. And unfortunately, too many people who are ill-informed, unread, and who have not spent 42 years looking at theology accept what they read in the New Testament and in the Old Testament as actual history, when in point of fact, it is not actual history. There is a message behind the message. And consequently, if you're reading the Bible, and if you're looking at theological subjects from the Bible point of view, in a materialistic way, you're never going to see the obvious story sitting right in front of you. I believe that the story in the New Testament, and I'm concerned about this because I believe the world is now facing another dark age. I think that we are now preparing ourselves to go into a very dark time that's coming on the earth. And I believe that the message that's in the New Testament is a very powerful, symbolic, metaphysical story that is not very well understood today. Let me go back to the original Hebrew religion. Because it forms the basis for Christianity, we need to look at where did any of these things come from. I'm famous for doing that. I couldn't care less who I offend. I want to know the truth. And all you got to do is go to any good library and just start reading. There are hundreds of great reference books out there that tell you where things have come from. First of all of the things which are going on in this world today, from 9/11, all of the wars in the Middle East, all of the incredible bloodshed that's being spilled all over the earth, can be traced back to, and you might want to remember what I'm saying here, because I'm sure you're not going to make the connection when I first tell you, but I'm going to try and explain it to you. The things which are happening today, the people who are in power in this country, the great generals from around the world who are planning wars and violence and bloodshed, all of this stuff can be traced back to the planet Saturn. Saturn is a very, very pivotal, important concept in theology and religion. And most people have never been told any of this and have no knowledge of it at all. But the planet Saturn is very important in world affairs, in theology. In the Islamic belief, the holy city of Mecca, which is in Saudi Arabia, Mecca has a Masonic circle, and within the Masonic circle is a square, because you got to do everything on the square, remember. You have a town square, you have New York Square, you have Vatican Square, you have Red Square, you have all kinds of squares. Why? Because this is Masonic, and it goes all the way back into the ancient world, the terms and symbols. Again, the planet Saturn is called the Black Square. It's called the Dark Sun, the Black Sun. This is what the Nazis and the SS and the Gestapo wore black. That's why priests wear black. That's why judges wear black robes. Why do you think a judge wears a black robe? He wears a black robe because when you used to graduate from university, you wear a black robe. Why black robes? Darth Vader wears a black robe. What the hell does a black robe have to do with anything? The judges wear black robes. You know, Supreme Court judges wear black robes. Black robes represent the priesthood of the planet Saturn, the Saturnalian Brotherhood. All you need to do is study Nazism, and you will begin to see that the powers behind the Nazi Party, the Thule Society, the Germanian Order, were all members of something called the Saturnalian Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of Saturn. Saturn was the god of darkness, chaos, and destruction. He teaches you a lesson. He will take your life if you don't listen to him. So consequently, Saturn was very, very important in the ancient world. Thank you. Saturn's name, incidentally, in the old Phoenician ancient Canaanite religion in the Middle East, the old Phoenician Canaanite worship of the planet Saturn was the most important god of all the ancient world, was the planet Saturn, and his symbol, long before the Hebrews were ever in Canaan, the symbol in Cana for the planet Saturn was a six-pointed star. Today we call that star the Star of David. There was no Star of David. It's the Star of Saturn. All of the Jewish reference books, all the Encyclopedia Judaica, you go to the synagogue, go up into Mulholland Drive, up to the Jewish University and spend 3 weeks there and look up Saturn. You'll find out that 98% of all Judaism is a worship of the planet Saturn. Better wake up and understand where this stuff comes from. Because if there is a God in heaven, if there is a divine presence in the universe that demands righteousness and justice, then you're going to have to rethink what we believe and where we're going and what the world is all about, because for the last 2,000 years we haven't done too well. Logic alone should tell you that when Jews were being marched into concentration camps, they were praying obviously to their God for protection and for help. There was no help coming. Christians have been praying to God to help this nation, to protect their family, and evil grows and multiplies each day. And the more Christians pray, the more evil the pervasiveness becomes. And the reason why is because we are not in tune with the universal God force. We're not in tune with the truth. We're in tune with what we've been told is the truth. We understand that thing that we've been told about government, that we have to pay your taxes because that's the law. You think, what law? Where is there a law that says that? Well, it's in there somewhere. No. Where is the law? Then you find out, well, it was just a lie. The whole thing was a lie. The whole thing is a sham. Well, the same thing is true in our theological thinking. The reason why I am bringing this subject up is because I feel it's important now in the year 2002, because I think that very soon we're going to experience some pretty dynamic spiritual things are going to begin to happen on the earth, because I do not believe that the divine presence in the universe that men have called God is going to allow this to go on much longer. But the way history has always shown us is that when God moves, theologically speaking, when God moves, people die. And consequently, I think that we are coming to a point where we're going to be in serious trouble, and that's why I want to help my fellow man to become spiritually prepared for what's coming. And the only way you're going to do that is understand where things come from and begin to appreciate we've been misled again. I have tons of videos, of slides I'd like to show, but there's so many things I want to talk about too. Let me get back to the planet Saturn. Saturn was referred to, as I said, its symbol was the six-pointed star. Today we call it the Star of David. Saturn was referred to as El, E-L. El was the god Saturn in the old Phoenician Canaanite system. And consequently, anyone that promoted the worship of El is where we get the word elder. You become an elder because you were worshiping El. And when you worship El and become an elder, then how did you get to be an elder? You got elected. So therefore we have elections. Now that you have been elected to be an elder, now you are one of the elites. Why? Because now you have moved up, like in an elevator. You are now moved up in society. World. Consequently, if anything's going to happen in this country to turn it around, we're going to need a renaissance, an intellectual, spiritual renaissance. Because you can't do it with arms. Adolf Hitler rose to power the same way George Bush did. It's the simple Mickey Mouse routine that it works every time. I'm ashamed of this country, and I'm ashamed of the people who call themselves Americans, who drive around with a damn silly-ass flag on their car and not even realize that's not an American flag. All you got to do is do your homework. You find out that is a United States flag. And it's not even an original United States flag, because an original United States flag has these stripes going vertical, not horizontal. But who the hell knows that? Who cares? I mean, we just put a flag on your car and drive around like a fool. It is a disgrace. Somewhere along the line, we're going to discover we've been had, if we haven't already figured it out. I want to show you how the planet Saturn, the Saturnalian Brotherhood, the worship of the planet Saturn. Saturn's color was black. The black, each one of the gods and each one of the planets were associated with a different color. Green was associated with Venus, and that's why today in Islamic countries today you will see all of their flags and harlotry in Islamic world are in green. And you'll see the crescent with the star. Many people think the crescent is the crescent of the moon, but it is not. According to the actual research documents, the crescent on the Islamic flags is the crescent of the planet Venus. And the star represents Venus. It is a religion that is based on the worship of Venus, but which has incorporated the Saturnalian philosophy in it. So, like all the other religions, it is also a very eclectic religion. We hear that God's name is Yahweh. Let me tell you something about Yahweh. I mean, I've spent 42 years looking at this stuff, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm amazed at how many people don't even begin to know what these words mean. Yahweh is not the name of God. Yahweh in Hebrew is an expressive term. It's expressing something. It's describing something. It's not a formal name of God. Yahweh in Hebrew simply means, and the best way to explain what the word means is to take a garden hose and hold the end of it, turn on the water, and you feel the pressure building up. When you release the hose, it's a release of pressure. It's a release of energy. In the Hebrew, in the ancient Hebrew, the release of dynamic energy was called Yahweh. And it was always associated with sex. It's the building up of the sexual urge, and the releasing of sex in the sex act was referred to in the ancient Phoenician Canaanite system as being one with Yahweh, the explosion of divine creativity. That's why our Jewish physicists have told us the universe came into existence by a big bang. Consequently, I become very disorganized in my thinking, because there's so many things I want to show you. So many things I've been wanting to tell people for years. I got to boil down 42 years into an hour or so. But suffice it to say that the planet Saturn is very important, and you need to remember that and do some research on it. And you will find that the Nazi Party was probably the most glorious Saturnalian brotherhood we've ever seen. Nazis were heavy into the Saturnalian system of philosophy, war, destruction. The ancient Phoenician Canaanites said that the women should listen to their god Saturn. They always knew Saturn had rings. So they said the women should listen to their gods, so women were to wear earrings. Men were to get married before their God, so they were to wear a wedding ring. Kings were to get crowned before their God, so consequently they would have a round crown, the corona. The ring. Saturn is the god of this world. From that we get the dark side of the Force, Darth Vader. Remember Darth Vader with his Nazi helmet speaking through the Masonic triangle? Somebody better do their homework. This stuff is fascinating when you get into it. In the ancient Phoenician Canaanite system, when it finally bled into Europe thousands of years ago, it formed what we call the Celtic Druidic system. The Celtic Druidic system had its origins in the old Phoenician Canaanite system. That whole area we call today Israel and Lebanon, that was called Phoenicia Cana. And consequently, that whole system of the Canaanite religion found its way into Eastern Europe and then into Northern Europe and formed the basis theologically for what came to be known as the Celtic Druidic system. The Celtic Druidic system, one of the most important symbols, and some of you have heard me say this before, one of the most important symbols in the old Celtic Druidic system was a magic wand, like Merlin the magician with his magic wand. That's Celtic Druidic. Magic wands were always made out of holly wood. Okay? And they're still working their magic on us in Hollywood. The system that we are under is the most manipulating, exploiting system that's ever been put together. But I'll tell you one thing. The Steven Spielbergs and the George Lucases and the Michael Eisners and all the guys that run the entertainment world, all of them are many things, but stupid is not one of them. These guys are Class A, top of the line intellectuals. They know the name of the tune. They know exactly how to manipulate your thinking. They have something called program music. And you go in and most people never think when they go to a movie or watch a television show. They never think about it. Who writes scripts? Scripts are written by scriptwriters. Scriptwriters scribble scripts. And consequently, the scribbling scriptwriters were called scribes. So when Jesus denounces the Pharisees and the scribes were the people who scribbled scripts. And consequently, the religious writers of the day, those who wrote all of those glorious religious writings, were all the scribes. They're being paid money by the system to write all of their silly little scribes, all of their silly little stuff that the masters wanted. Why do you think the King James Version is called the authorized version of the Bible? It's the one King James authorized. He didn't authorize you to go doing too much research on your own. You get your head cut off. Consequently, we go back to Yahweh. I mean, have you ever wondered why we call God the Father? You ever thought about that? I mean, women, some of the women's liberals were saying could be a God the Mother, you know. I don't know. But the point being is that why do we call God the Father? It's because of rain. Rain is why we call God the Father. Because in the old ancient Hindu, if you go back into the old Sanskrit writings of the ancient Hindu religion, you will find that the divine presence of God, the Most High, was referred to in their language, in the old Sanskrit language of India. God was referred to as rain, R-A-I-N, rain. And consequently, the idea was that the earth was our mother, Mother Nature, Mother Earth. And Mother Nature gets impregnated with God's, the Father's, sacred fluid that comes and falls on the earth and impregnates Mother Nature, because everything grows. And so once a year, there was a celebration of Phoenicia Cana when the spring rains would come. And consequently, the Phoenician Canaanites knew that the rains were coming and it was going to bring a whole new life to the earth. So consequently, they had a celebration of spring, and it was called the marriage feast of Cana. The marriage feast of Cana. And this is in the Bible. As I said, that there are many things in the scriptures that are hidden right in front of you. And if you don't know what they mean, you don't know where they came from, you'd be surprised when you begin to look at where these stories come from. The whole idea of the marriage feast of Cana was Mother Earth, Mother Nature asked God's Son, our risen Savior, and of course the Son is your risen Savior. As a matter of fact, if it don't come up, we're dead. So consequently, the Son was our risen Savior, and so Mother Earth asked God's Son to draw water. The water is drawn by the Son, so it can grow, it can fall on the grapes, and the grapes can be made into wine, so it changes water into wine. And this goes back to the old ancient Phoenician Canaanite, and even the Jewish rabbis will tell you that. Consequently, there are symbols and ideas and concepts in government which are put there purposely to mislead you. There are symbols and ideas in all of our systems purposely to mislead you. And I'm saying that even the theological basis for what we think we're doing has also been misled. And until such time as we get it right, we're never going to have that divine protection that the universe offers you when you're doing it right. And again, what I do is not to offend anyone, but I want to show you how these things have crept into our modern day society. Our international banking cartels, which control, finance, and organize and direct all of this corruption, wars, and bloodshed, and we're all well aware of that, but most people don't know that international banking cartels go back to the Vatican. The Vatican, as far back as the 5th, 6th, and 7th century, was the power of Europe. The Vatican dominated Europe, and Europe dominated the world. Even the Uniform Commercial Code, the international banking codes of the world, are based on Vatican canon law. I mean, that's why when you walk into a courtroom, why do you have to go to court? Does anybody ever wonder why you go to court? I mean, you play basketball on a court, and you play tennis on a court. The whole idea in a court is to put the ball back in the other guy's court. That's right. It's just a game. Back and forth, they're throwing the ball back at each other, and the judge is there wearing a black robe. Black because of the planet Saturn. Saturn was the god of banking. That's why the judge sits on the bench. Look it up. Look up the word bench. You will find the word bench is a Latin word for a bank. So the judge rules for the bank. He don't care who's going to win or lose. Somebody's going to pay. And he's going to get paid. What does he care? Okay? So consequently, the judge rules for the bank. He sits on the bench. The whole idea is you're in court to play ball back on the court. How do you play tennis on a court? You play with a racket. Why? Because the whole thing is a racket. They're using terms and symbols and emblems. And they're playing on you. You know, a lot of people think, well, these are just play on words. Don't bet on it. The justice. That's why it's a criminal justice system. Okay? The mafia runs this town. I personally know that. Los Angeles is run by the mob. If you don't think so, they got their own license tags. The mafia has its own license tag that the police department does not touch. They see a mafia license tag, they do not touch it. I'm not going to get into that. But I can tell you that the mafia and the mob runs this country. And the Catholic Church is behind the mob. Period. My mother had an uncle when I was growing up as a child. I only remember him faintly because I was very little, who worked in the Vatican Secretary of State's office. He was not clergy, he was civilian. And I grew up in my hometown having two uncles who were federal judges. My great-grandfather was a senator from the state of Florida, a very powerful man, and he died in office because they couldn't get rid of him. Why? Because he was mobbed, and everybody knew it. My Uncle Joe Valenzino used to come over every now and then with his big cigar and sit, and my father used to tell me, don't you ever, ever ask Uncle Joe what he does for a living. Ever. You just take whatever little presents and be cool and sit down, and if you open your mouth, I'll knock your teeth out. Okay? So I understood there was a system in operation. My mother, my beloved mother, my father, my family, all of my family, including myself, were born and raised Catholic. So I'm not talking about the Catholic people. I'm not talking about the black people. I'm not talking about the Jewish people. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about political organizations. We're talking about institutions that are financed all over the world. Huge, powerful financial empires. That's what I'm talking about, not the people. So I grew up understanding that there was a whole system in operation, and I decided at the ripe old age of 18, when I left home to come to California, I wanted to be on my own and do my own thinking. And I started out immediately collecting and reading books on Nazism, the communist movement, the philosophies, all the different occult sciences. And it became apparent to me that the entire world system is corrupt. So what we have today on the world scene, we call them world governments and United Nations with all the different governments represented. In point of fact, what we're seeing is gang wars. We got the Crips and the Bloods and the East Side Gang and the West Side and this group and that group. And today we call them nations. No, they're only gangs. They're all corrupt, money-grubbing, and so consequently, what goes around comes around. And we're seeing the complete breakdown of law and order around the world, and I believe that there is a divine retribution coming, and this is what I'm trying to do, is make people aware that do not put your faith and trust in man in whom there is no salvation. Do not look to your religious institutions for any spirituality. They don't have any. I don't care what it is, they don't have it. The very word church, the word church is an English word. From the King's English, it goes back to a word in Scottish, kirk. K-I-R-K is church in English. Kirk in Scotland goes back to a Roman goddess, Circe. Circe goes back to a Greek goddess in Greece called Circe. Circe gave birth to Roman Circe. Roman Circe gave birth to Scottish Kirk, and Scottish Kirk gave birth to the English word church. So consequently, when you go to church, just remember it goes back to Mother Circe in Greece. Circe, if you go back to the library and get some books on Greek mythology, it will tell you that her name gives birth to what we call the church today. And Mother Circe was able to hypnotize people and bring them into her home, hypnotize them, and so that they would lose their mind and become animals, and then she would feed off of them, eat them and feed off of them. That's Greek mythology, Mother Circe. So consequently, Mother Church has done just that. She has hypnotized people, brought people into her house, and consequently lives off of them. One of the most important financial institutions in the world is the Roman Catholic Church, and all the other churches like the Mormons and Seventh-day Adventists and Christadelphians and Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to catch up with. Consequently, all you need to do is just go see Godfather 3, and it will tell you, that's a true story, Godfather 3, about the killing of the Pope, when the Propaganda Due, the P2 Lodge of Freemasonry, had to get rid of the Pope, because he was a good man. That particular Pope was a good man, and he wanted to try and straighten out the church, and they figured they'd better straighten him out. So he was dead. He died on the 33rd day of his pontificate. He died on the 33rd day. I think that's interesting. And that's in the movie Godfather 3. Consequently, I don't know if you know this or not, but at the end of the Second World War, to show you another facet of the church's work, during the Second World War in 1945, actually early 45, when the Germans and the Nazis began to see that they were losing the war, and it became evident that the Nazis were going to lose, the powers that be in this world wanted to get the top Nazis out of Germany before the Russians or the other Allied forces came through and would kill them. And so consequently, the Vatican, along with the CIA, the American CIA and the Vatican, made a deal where the Vatican would provide for all the top Nazis their false passports, false ID, and slip them out of Europe and send them to Central America, South America, Uruguay, and Paraguay, which incidentally those two countries were founded by Jesuits. Probably some of the most powerful criminal syndicate in the world is the Jesuits. But so we have the Nazis here in America. You know, we went to the moon supposedly with good old American ingenuity, like Dr. Werner von Braun and all those other Nazi fascist murderers that came here who are making money off of this people. And I'm just amazed when I watch the space shuttle taking off and you see all the Americans standing out there in Florida watching the space shuttle take off and everyone's applauding. I think, what are you applauding for? You ain't going anywhere. The hell you applauding for? If they're going somewhere, you're not going, that's for sure. You can pay for it, but you ain't going. You ever thought about how much pollution, I mean poisonous, toxic pollution that pours out of the back end of a Saturn booster, how much poison is poured out of that into our atmosphere every time they shoot one of those things? Most people don't think about that. Consequently, I believe that it's a time that the idea, this time has come to look at the real foundations of our system of thinking in this world, because if you're going to call out to God, you better get it straight. Because there are too many times in the Scriptures, and I again have to re-emphasize my appreciation for the divine principles in the Scriptures. I believe that there is a profound story, especially in the New Testament. I think that the New Testament is a redemption story. But most people have no idea in the world what redemption means. Well, as a classic example, how many Christians understand what Christ means? I mean, you can't talk, you know, I hear Christians talking all the time about Antichrist, and they haven't got the faintest idea what Christ means. How many people know what the word Christ means, or where it comes from? I mean, how many Jews talk about the Holocaust and haven't got the faintest idea in the world what a Holocaust is? Oh, a Holocaust is a terrible tragedy. Oh, it's a big fire, or something like that. It's terrible something. No. That's not what a Holocaust is. A Holocaust, according to the actual research documents, means a sacrificial, ritualistic burnt offering. When Abel and Cain and Abel in the Bible offered up a sacrifice to God, the word in the Hebrew Bible is they offered up their holocaust to God. So a holocaust is a ritualistic, sacrificial, burnt offering. Get it right. Why did the Jewish leaders in this country and around the world use the term Holocaust? Very interesting. I think that they are not telling us the whole story. Consequently, as I said, how many Christians use the word Antichrist and don't even know what the word Christ means? Christ comes from Christos. Christos in Greek means oil. That's why you have Pillsbury cooking oil called Crisco. Crisco is Christo. Christo is Christ. So Jesus Christ is Jesus the oil. I mean, that's what it means. Jesus oil. Okay? You say, well, Jesus, why? Well, because Jesus was the anointed. When you always become anointed with oil. The kings in Israel were always anointed with holy oil, so they became anointed. You know what the word anointed means in Hebrew? I don't want to get into that right now. Basically, anointing comes from the word sex. You'd be surprised how much sex is entwined in religion. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. There's a huge amount of words and terms and symbols. And when we begin to see how these stories have been put together and misrepresented, again, I believe that the Bible has been misrepresented. I think that if you go back into the ancient world and begin to see where the Bible comes from, who wrote it, and you begin to read the encoded story, it becomes fascinating stuff. And when you understand that, and I do a whole lecture, sometimes it takes 4 to 5 hours for me to do it, on astrotheology. Astrotheology is the basis for all religion on the face of the earth. It's called astrotheology. Happily, most people don't know that, so nobody's offended. But most people do not realize that astrotheology forms the foundation for virtually all religions on the face of the earth. It has to do with the worship of the heavens. And if you go back into the most ancient times, and this is a subject I've always loved, is ancient theologies. If you go back into the most, consequently, when the sun would come up in the morning, that was the one thing that saved the human race, is the coming of the sun. God's sun, the light of the world. Of course the sun lights the world. And the sun doesn't belong to China or Africa or anybody else. It belongs to God. So it was God's Son, our risen Savior. And of course the sun is your Savior, because if it don't come up, we're dead. But once you understand the concepts and ideas, then you begin to question, why did Judas go out and kiss Jesus? The scripture, you know how in the scripture talks about Judas went out and kissed Jesus? First of all, many Christians think Judas went out and kissed Jesus to identify him. Logic alone would tell you that's not true. If you just think about it. I mean, in a little Mickey Mouse town, and where Jesus would have been living, in a little small, it's not Chicago, it's a little small town, and even the Romans back in Rome knew who Jesus was, so everybody knows who he is, everybody knows what he's doing. And consequently, when the scribes and Pharisees, the religious leaders, decided they'd had enough of him and wanted to arrest him, you think they're going to have to send out somebody to find him and point him out? No, everybody in town knows who he is. Well, then why did Judas go out and kiss him? And most people think Judas went out and kissed Jesus to identify. It doesn't say that. It says he went out to kiss Jesus to betray him, not identify. What do you mean, betray? That's interesting. Because even the mafia today, when they're going to kill you, they give you the kiss of death. They've kissed you off. Why? Because in the old ancient world, when a scorpion bites you, the scorpions in the Middle East have 2 stingers, one on top of the other. And when they bite you, they leave a cut in your skin that looks just like a human lips, looks just like lips. And consequently, the ancient people said that you just got the kiss of death. He just kissed you off, okay? And consequently, that's what Judas was doing, giving him the kiss of death. Why? It has to do with astrotheology. Very interesting stuff. Now, I could talk all night on this stuff because I love it, but I wanted to show you a few, because I believe that seeing things are a lot more impressive than just hearing me talk. If you remember Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. First of all, when Indiana Jones is going out to look for the Lost Ark, we're talking about the Ark of the Covenant. Where's the first place he goes to? He goes to Tibet. Now, why would you go to Tibet if you're looking for the Hebrew Lost Ark of the Covenant? Well, it's because Tibet has something very, very important connected to that symbol of the Ark of the Covenant. You better go back and look at the Buddhists and the Tibetans to understand the Ark of the Covenant, period. Second, where does he go? Once he goes to Tibet, who does he find up in Tibet looking for the Lost Ark if it isn't a Nazi? And consequently, where did they go from there? He goes directly to the Holy Land to look for the Lost Ark of the Covenant. No, he goes to Egypt. Why Egypt? It's because Steven Spielberg has many things, but stupid ain't one of them. He goes to Egypt because the whole idea of the Lost Ark is Egyptian, not Hebrew. 1,000 years before Hebrews were ever in the area called Egypt, the Egyptians had something called the Ark of the Contract. The Ark of the Contract, which I will show you, the Ark of the Contract was a box with two angels' wings, with wings over it, and it was an Egyptian symbol, and it symbolized a contract that the pharaohs had made with the gods who came down here from Sirius, from the ancient star system of Sirius. They were called, Sirius is called the dog star. And consequently, you take dog, D-O-G, and turn it around for us, it becomes God. G-O-D is dog spelled backwards. It goes back to Sirius, the dog star. It goes back to Anubis in the Egyptian. So that the Ark of the Contract became known as the Ark of the Covenant. No, it's the Ark of the Contract, and it was 1,000 years before Hebrews ever had it. Consequently, when you understand our symbolism in theology and religion, you come to find out that we have been sold a bill of goods on so much. And why do you have these institutions that the religion, philosophy, politics, all of these systems are institutions which are being financed, organized, and directed by the people who mean to put you into bonds and chains. God has created all of the animals to be free. He created everything. God who has created all things, freedom is the one thing that you see everywhere, except for man. And consequently, the real freedom in man is up here. Consequently, the old Hiram Mann, one of the first governors of the state of California, Hiram Mann said,
after carefully watching this video, here is my deep critical analysis. This is how black origin stories were altered. The lie that black people were cursed is something which is so much prevalent, and I think I have spoken about it not so far away, but I have spoken about something around this curse of Ham. You know, one of the most dangerous lies preached during slavery and Jim Crow was the claim that black people were descendants of Ham and therefore cursed to servitude. But this was not biblical truth. It was biblical manipulation. This was not biblical truth. It was a biblical manipulation. You understand? See, the scriptures never says that Ham was cursed. The curse was placed on Canaan, not Africa. White preachers rewrote what the Bible said to justify slavery, racism, and hierarchy. You see? This lie only makes sense when you expose the power behind it, a system that needed a holy excuse for exploitation, you know? So, Western Christianity painted biblical figures with European images. Jesus himself became white. Moses became white. Even the Egyptians, who were African, became light-skinned in the paintings. But geography tells another story. Israel, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan shared intertwined histories. Africa and the ancient Near East were culturally linked, you know. Many biblical characters. We have the Cushites, the Ethiopians, and the Egyptians were African peoples, you know. So we are going to see how and expose how whiteness was inserted into this scriptural text. We see that the white Bible was not theology, it was propaganda. You see? The lie of African spiritual inferiority. Missionaries often called African religions dark, savage, or primitive. This was not about religion. It was about controlling people's mind, you know? If you convince someone that God never belonged to them, you make them depend on your version of God. You see, dependency then leads to submission. See here the lie is, the idea is this. This lie served the logic of colonization. Break the spiritual backbone and the body becomes easier to control, you know? So there must have been a motive behind these religious lies, you know? And I've classified them into political motives, cultural motives, and economic motives. Slavery was an economic system first, a racial system second. To justify owning human beings, enslavers needed to do things. They needed to use a holy argument. They needed to use a moral argument. They needed to use a cultural argument. And religion was the perfect tool. If God approved slaveries, then enslavers could sleep at night, you know. Then we also have political motives. After emancipation, racist systems began new ways to maintain control. Churches were used to, first of all, teach obedience. Second, present high authority as divine authority. Third, these political motives also erased African contribution to civilization. A controlled narrative keeps a population politically silent, you know. Another one is we had the psychological motives. Whiteness needed to believe it was superior by erasing biblical presence while societies protected their self-image. We are chosen, we are favored, we are the image of God. This is all the lies they told, you know. Racist theology gave emotional comfort to the oppressor even while destroying the oppressed who were blacks, you know. The fourth motive was the cultural motive. Europeans wanted to define civilization as something that belonged to whiteness. Acknowledging African influence on Christianity would break that illusion. So many African history was removed, distorted, and rewritten, you know. So how does these lies influence modern America? Even today as we speak, many churches avoid discussing Africa in the Bible. Black children grow up seeing white image of God. Societies are still linking blackness with sin, danger, or curse. The legacy of religious distortion fuels self-hate and insecurity. Black people internalize these lies in subtle ways. First of all is doubting their worth. Second, believing they must prove their humanity. Third is feeling spiritually disconnected from the Bible. These are not mistakes. They are the shadows of centuries of manipulation, you know. So how can black people overcome these lies? How can they reclaim the African presence in the Bible? We can do that by first studying and looking at the countries such as Kush, modern-day Ethiopia, Egypt, listening to people and having a testimony of the Queen of Sheba. Simon of Cyrene was a black man, you know. You also have the early African churches, these testimonies of black people in the Bible, you see. Read the text in Africa, placed back where it belongs. Reclaiming these stories restores dignity and identity, you know. So we need to challenge the image of the white God. If God is always depicted white, it certainly teaches us that authority is white, goodness is white, holiness is white, you know. Redefining the image of God frees the mind from subconscious racial hierarchy. God is not a race. God is not a skin color, you know. Also, we must teach children a correct history. Children must know this. Christianity existed in Africa before it existed in Europe. Ethiopia is mentioned more times in the Bible than Rome. Blackness has always been part of sacred history. Empowered children grow into powerful adults. Another thing we must understand is we must build spiritual communities centered on truth. Black churches can preach historically accurate teachings, remove colonial theology, discuss Africa openly, and break the silence around biblical racism. A truthful congregation creates a liberated generation. Psychological liberation is one thing which is mandatory. Black people must heal from the trauma of spiritual manipulation by reading the Bible with African eyes, rejecting narratives of inferiority and embracing ancestral dignity. You see, there was a black American who said, his name was Toni Morrison. He said that the function of racism is distraction. Spiritual lies distract black people from their divine capacity. Another thing we as black people must do is we must understand the past empowers modern resistance. People can use their corrected spiritual identity to challenge systemic racism, discriminatory policies, white nationalistic Christian movement, and also cultural institutions that still push white biblical images. You know, spiritual truths becomes political power. And so, to conclude, we must rewrite the stolen story of black people. The religious lies told to black people were never accidental. They were systemic tools of control, economic, political, psychological, and cultural. The construction, what I'm doing now, helps us to expose the hidden motivation and breaks the spell. To overcome these lies in modern America, black people must reclaim their biblical roots, build spiritual identity. They must challenge whitewashed image of God, and they must teach their children the truth. And they must also walk with dignity, knowing that the story was never lost, but buried. Again, as the proverb says, when a story is stolen, the people forget their own footsteps. Today, black people are remembering their footsteps again. And once you remember your true origin, no lie can hold you captive. Yeah. This is this is EFK original documentaries. I hope that you've gained value from watching all these. If you've gained value, subscribe, share the videos, share to make it get to as many people as God allows it. Yeah. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one.